This presentation is called The Bible and Crisis Types. It is presented by Dr. Sharon Lee at the Apex School of Theology. Much of the Bible deals with crisis. Adam, Eve, Cain, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, just to name a few, were people who faced crises that the Old Testament describes in detail. Jesus faced crises, especially at the time of crucifixion, and so did the disciples, Paul, and many early believers. Several of the epistles were written to help individuals or churches meet crises, and Hebrews 11 summarizes both crises that had happy endings and those that resulted in torture, suffering, and death. Gary Collins, in his book Christian Counseling, identifies 4 crises types. The first one that he addresses is accidental or situational. And these occur when there is a sudden threat, a disruptive event, or unexpected illness, the experience of rape or other violence, war, economic depression, the loss of one's job or savings, or pregnancy apart from marriage are some examples. Some of these crises solidify a family and they pull together to overcome the obstacles and make things better. Often they originate outside the family and involve events such as a natural disaster, a serious house fire, or even racial prejudice. When stress is internal, as a suicide attempt or infidelity or child abuse, alcoholism or drug abuse, the crisis is more disruptive and inclined to tear the family apart. Even more disruptive are those that come in sequence and follow quickly on the heels of another. This was Job's experience. Within a short period of time, this religious man lost his family, his wealth, his health, and status. His marriage became strained, and his anger and inner turmoil became obvious. He was confused as to why a caring God would let so many bad things happen to a good person. The second area that he addresses is and are developmental crises, and he says that these happen in the course of normal human development. Leaving home and going away to college, adjusting to marriage and then to parenthood, facing retirement, adjusting to declining health, or the deaths of one's friends. These can all demand new approaches to coping and problem solving, despite the fact that most of these can be anticipated. Abraham and Sarah coped with moving when their destination was unknown. They faced criticism during their many years of childlessness. Family stress occurred with the birth of Ishmael and the command to sacrifice Isaac. The birth of John the Baptist to elderly parents Zacharias and Elizabeth must have caused stress and required adjustments, be made. The third area is existential crises, and these overlap with the others. Disturbing truths such as, my life has no direction, or I didn't get the anticipated promotion, or I'm now a widow, single again. My marriage has ended in divorce. My illness is incurable. I have been rejected by my son or my daughter. I've been rejected because of the color of my skin. These realizations take time and effort to assimilate. Elijah was chased by Jezebel and ran to the wilderness, where he concluded that his life was a failure. Jonah had a similar thought as he debated with God. In the midst of struggles, Job must have wondered what would happen to him now that he had lost everything. including the support from people who might have been his friends. The fourth area is national or community crises, and these extend beyond individuals to involve large groups of people. When a tornado or earthquake destroys much of a community, an office building is destroyed by a terrorist, or a country is attacked by an outside force, the crisis impacts large numbers of people. There are many biblical examples of this kind, especially represented by the repeated attacks on God's people by foreign armies. Why? Why crises? It can be difficult and often impossible to answer. Even the Bible does not give clear and complete reasons. Disobedience led to many of the attacks on Israel, and David made some foolish decisions, which led to crisis situations in his life and the life of others. Job never did learn about the debate between Satan and God, which led to his crisis. And there are some crises that we cannot comprehend or explain. We may agree that every event has a divine purpose, and it is ultimately under God's control. Some crises can be learning experiences that mold character and teach us about God and His resources, and some may stimulate growth. Some we will never be able to explain. We can help others cope and grow through these experiences by using counseling methods that they can apply. The effects of crises. Physiological reactions may include rapid breathing, faster heartbeats, hypervigilance, increased adrenaline output, making fight or flight easier. This increased state of arousal can last for days or even weeks. If it persists, it can wear the body down and bring more serious physical and emotional symptoms. People almost always feel a sense of loss and lack of control. Trauma research describes how the sense of powerlessness following a crisis also can make the crisis worse. Research data shows that after a major hurricane in Puerto Rico, there were lots and lots of people working together to put their lives back together. When government officials arrived and told them to stop working until the damage could be assessed and financial aid organized, everything came to a halt. People were suddenly forced to sit still in the middle of their disaster and do nothing. All the energy that was mobilized now turned into violence with rioting, looting, and assaults. A sense of helplessness after a trauma needs to be overcome with productive activity. A lack of power and control makes a crisis worse. So a lack of power, control, or no visible way to escape, to fight back, or have some kind of impact to make things better, all tend to complicate the trauma. Fear of the unknown, of death or abandonment, worry about finances, and fear of what will happen next all impacts the individual. So what is crisis intervention? It is a way of providing immediate, temporary, emotional first aid to victims of psychological and physical trauma. The intervener must react skillfully and quickly to deal with behavior that is often disorganized, confused, and potentially harmful. Since they frequently appear suddenly, and are of limited duration, they are best treated as soon as possible after they occur. A few counseling goals. To help the person cope effectively with the immediate crisis situation and return to his or her pre-crisis level of functioning is goal number one. And this is whether or not their level of functioning was ideal prior to the crisis. Number two, it's to decrease the anxiety, apprehension, and other insecurities that may persist during the crisis and after it passes. We must remember that we should not expect to treat every person the same. The nature of the crisis may determine your approach as well as the person's reaction to the crisis. To teach crisis management techniques so the person is better prepared to anticipate and deal with future crises. And another goal would be to consider biblical teachings about crisis so the person learns from the crisis and grows as a result. The psychological first aid checklist. You first want to make contact. You go to others to show warmth and understanding. You listen carefully to understand their concerns and what they need most. You make eye contact unless the culture has a taboo against direct eye contact. Touching can be comforting to most people, but some cultures frown on this type of contact as well. So we need to be sensitive to the person and consider the motto, if in doubt, don't. Secondly, you want to reduce anxiety. A calm, relaxed manner can help reduce anxiety. We listen patiently and attentively as the counselor describes the situation. You want to encourage them to talk about insecurities and other feelings. Provide reassuring facts. Gently suggest alternative ways to look at a situation. You try to answer questions honestly, but without raising the anxiety level unnecessarily. Third, you want to focus on issues. You help them decide what specific issues must be addressed first and what immediate problems need to be solved. Then you evaluate the resources. Spiritual resources are most important, and never do we want to lose sight of the indwelling presence and guidance of the Holy Spirit. Scripture can be presented as truth rather than a hammer. You want to consider personal resources, the intellectual abilities, skills, past experiences, and helpful attitudes. Ask them to list resources and get input from others. And then there's interpersonal resources. Often they already have a network that may just need to be activated. There may be family, friends, business associates, church members, and the community. You want to consider pastoral resources, counseling, and a belief system that can bring meaning in the midst of chaos. And then you consider the additional resources. They may be legal, medical, psychological, financial, educational. The counselor can help find these resources. You then want to plan an intervention. So after evaluating the problem and considering the resources, decide on a course of action that moves beyond the crises, looking together at the facts and listing alternatives, and then decide on a course of action. You want to encourage action, and you may need to encourage them to move forward, to help them evaluate progress and modify plans. You certainly want to instill hope. And you can instill hope by sharing scriptural truths, examining the self-defeating logic and self-talk, and get them moving and take some action. Follow-up is another first aid. Crisis counseling is usually brief in nature. So some people will follow up on anniversaries. They find that is often helpful. And referral. There will be times when the intervention procedures fail to work effectively. No counselor is able to help everybody. Key points for busy counselors. Number one, a crisis is a turning point. It usually cannot be avoided. A crisis may be expected or unexpected, real or imagined, actual or possibility. But most arrive quickly and then they're gone. They leave devastation behind. There are at least 4 types of crises mentioned in the Bible. We've talked about accidental situational. This is sudden, disruptive, and an unexpected loss. We talked about developmental, and this occurs in the normal human development, such as retirement or moving across country or death. There's existential crisis. There's forced to face, who am I? And what is my purpose now? And fourth, national or community. And this would include tornadoes and earthquakes. These usually involve large groups of people. In times of crises, people experience different emotions and symptoms. Physical symptoms such as confusion and a sense of loss. They may experience powerlessness and a lack of control. There are consistent goals in crisis intervention. One goal would be prevention, and they can be warned based on evidence, such as an impending marriage breakup. Can also help to one of the other goals might be to develop skills such as communication and stress management, self-control, money management. Information helps, as in potentially destructive approaching weather. Social and spiritual supports, and preparation for minimizing impending stress. And then there are ways to prevent occurrence or a worsening. There is evidence that resilience can be taught. Some people are resilient in times of crises. And then in times of crises, some people rather, emerge as heroes. But these heroes may not always be noticed or affirmed for their acts, and we need to make sure that we are noticing and acknowledging them. To help a person cope effectively with the situation and decrease anxiety and apprehension, we want to teach crisis management techniques. We want to consider the biblical teachings. And again, with the heroes that emerge, oftentimes they do not get the affirmation here on earth. But God is aware of their sacrifices and their commitments, and someday many will hear from God Himself, "Well done, good and faithful servant." This concludes this presentation, and this information was adapted from the book by Gary Collins, Christian Counseling, A Comprehensive Guide. Thank you.